I have once the BBC people at my home. She said me that my husband told me to ask you 2 questions. I say, I don't mind, you ask me. And she said that in your Indian community, the men, they are always suppressed by women, suppressed by men. I say, look, you don't know any history of India. Long ago, the women, they were in battlefield, riding on the horse, sword in her hand, and child in her back. And she was fighting in a battlefield. You know that? You don't know the history of it.
It was a landmark in terms of the trade unions. In the 5 to 10 years before Grunwick, workforces split along racial lines. Unions let down black and Asian workers. Dockers marched for Enoch Powell. Suddenly, you got the biggest mobilization in labour movement history around an overwhelmingly female Asian workforce. It was a defining moment in our history.
We are fighting for union recognition in this company, basic. And now when we are outside, and company have sacked all the people who they came out to join our union, then our another basic now at a moment, it is reinstatement as well.
We also think it is good for all workers, not only for only us, who is coming after us to working inside. Because we can live after a few years, but who is coming after us to work inside? And good for all workers, because £28 and £30 is nothing in this time.
I was in India, but from East Africa I went to India. And 4 years I went there. And then in 1968, when they were passing the law, immigration law, my husband came first, before the law passed, and I joined with him afterward, with 2 children.
72 में हम यहाँ आए, जब वो ईदी अमीन युगांडा से निकाले ने उस वक्त हम यहाँ आए, तो वहाँ सब सारा बिजनेस सब छोड़ के यहाँ आए थे।
हम एशियन ऐसा टाउन रोड पर मिल जाती है तो किधर काम करता है, हम पूछ के तुम किधर काम करते हैं, तो बोलता है इधर ग्रनविक में काम करते हैं, तो उधर अच्छा है, एशियन लेडीज को मिलता है काम, तो पीछे पूछ के आया।
ऐसा नहीं कि हम पढ़े लिखे तो हमको ऐसा ही काम चाहिए, जहाँ फैक्ट्री में जहाँ भी मिला वहाँ काम करके हमने बच्चे को बड़े किए ना।
I got from the friend that there is a job vacancy available at Grunwick's Processing Library, so I just went for the interview and I got a job there.
And slowly and gradually I saw that mostly the English girls, they were working, they left. And they replaced it by the Indian people.
My recollections were that we felt a very strong urge to do something about the unfairness that we felt. And in that unfairness, there was also some elements of looking for rights.
The behavior of those managers, because they were real bullies. And they will come in and they would look at you as if, you're nothing. If you've done a mistake, they would shout at you. If you do it again, the next time you go through the door and things like that.
They were the bosses and you either did what they told you or you were out. And that's how they treated everybody.
Yeah, and one day it happens to me and I can't stand anymore and I walk out. I walk out and then in the afternoon some boys also walk out, and this suddenly realized in my mind that we should ask for the union.
I remember just running up to the Citizen Advice Bureau in High Street in Wembley and saying, you know what, we've got a problem here at workplace and we want to organize and we want to call a strike. We need to contact a union. Who should we contact?
My name is Tom Durkin and I'm chairman of the Brent Trades Council. And I became involved in the Grunwick strike almost from the first day, because members of the strike committee called to see me and asked for assistance to be put in touch with the union and also to help draw up a press statement and a leaflet.
The trades hall in Brent was situated very close to both the Grunwick factories, and it was there that the strikers were able to go, and it was there that they were able to take people who became interested in the strike as they came out of the factories. It was there that the unions were able to pay the strike pay, it was there that they served meals for the strikers, and it was there that they met and made all their decisions and organised the strike.
The local trades council had tried on at least 2 occasions prior to that year to organise this company because it was totally unorganised, and George had picked on whoever happened to lead it and sacked him immediately. So his position was quite clear. A, he was against trade unionism. B, he was willing to sack people prior to this dispute. And C, he intended to pay low wages, although he was a clever man and making a good income himself.
I've never had a holiday for the 3 years I've been there, or got paid for bank holiday, or bonus while the others were getting it. Last Christmas was the first I got a bonus and got paid for bank holiday, and it's all because of the strike.
The fact that they were all immigrants, or at least all members of the Asian community, that was interesting to us. I don't think we'd ever come across a group of workers quite like that were anxious to come and join the union. And there was a sense that maybe we were dealing with a part of the workforce here that the union movement had not actually had much to do with. So that was unusual.
I mean, Apex were a union of the old labour right, and it was an unusual home for the strikers. It was accidental that they ended up in Apex. I have to say that, in fairness to Apex, whilst there were disagreements later on as to how the dispute should be brought to a successful conclusion, they really did give them enormous support. But I think it was something of a culture shock for Apex, handling a dispute as bitter as that, and workers new to the trade union movement who were loyal to their union but weren't in any way respectful of union bureaucracy.
Inside, obviously, there was two different sides. So there was a 2 different management style. One side was like a white collar, and one side was a production. But on our side, especially with me and a few of my colleagues, myself, I was a senior supervisor there, so I used to get along with all the management and managers in my particular department, my area.
Well, with the black and white department, because it was a smaller department there, the conditions were average, I would say. There wasn't a problem as I could see it.
शुरू में तो मैं कुछ बुरा नहीं लगा, ठीक ही लगा था। तो जिसको बैड एक्सपीरियंस हुई उनको पता चला, हमको तो ऐसा कोई एक्सपीरियंस नहीं हुआ था।
खराब नहीं हुआ है फैक्ट्री में।
हमने ओवर टाइम नहीं किया था।
हमने ओवर टाइम नहीं किया, मैं ओवर टाइम नहीं करती थी। मैंने बताया था ना वो लोग उसको कि मैं ओवर टाइम नहीं कर सकेगी, मेरे को पेन है ना बैंक में, इसके लिए। तो उसने बोला कि 5 बजे तुम कार क्लॉक करके चला जाना।
A lot of the managers were okay and there were no difficulties. The problem was the mail order department, and in the mail order department they had the sort of logistical difficulty of achieving a quick turnaround of the photographs that were being processed. This was the basis of the business as far as Grunwick work was concerned. And they employed in that department a manager called Malcolm Alden, who was very autocratic, and his job was to achieve the quickest possible turnaround. And for that end, in the summer months, they used compulsory overtime. And he imposed this compulsory overtime in a not very sensitive way. And this caused all sorts of frictions in that department. So certainly this was a problem for the mail order department, and if it hadn't been for that manager in that department, there wouldn't have been a strike, in my opinion.
I was working in the Cobble Road branch, and the strike had started initially on Chapter Road, and I was in the Cobble Road branch. And after a few days, we heard that people had come out on strike, but we didn't pay any attention to it.
When the strike started, we heard that people had walked out and whatnot. But I did not join the strike till about 2 or 3 weeks after.
We were 6 of us, were main guys. And we said if we can come out, then they'll give them a support. And the company would give in to the demands of the people, the grievances they had in Chapter Road, And the management heard about that, so we were taken away one afternoon, 6 of us. And we met the management in the Kingsbury Park on the Friant Way. And they were trying to convince us not worth going on strike and just to put us off, So we went to work next day and then decided, let's come out on strike and we'll make the big impact and hopefully it will be resolved in a week, but it didn't.
मैं इसके लिए निकली कि यूनियन रिकग्नाइज करना था, इसके लिए बोला चलो हम साथ देने के लिए निकले थे कि यूनियन अंदर आ जावे तो सबको अच्छा है ने। पीछे धीरे धीरे जब भी सुबह सब काम पर चले तो धीमे धीमे सबको बताया कि ऐसा हमको स्ट्राइक करना है, हमको यूनियन लेना है, तो अभी कोई नहीं जाओ अंदर। तो धीरे धीरे जिसको नहीं जाना था वो खड़ा रह गया बाहर, और दूसरी तो चली गई औरत अंदर। पीछे वो लोग को बहुत पर्सुएट किया, मैंने जयाबेन सबके घर पर जा करके हमने बहुत पर्सुएट किया कि तुम ना जाओ, कभी तुम नहीं जाएगा तो वो लोग यूनियन रखेगा, पर किसी ने नहीं सुना।
Some of the people really in there wants a union, but they really don't want to take the chance of coming out because they are not certain that the union is going to win this fight. So they rather to stay in there, wait, should in case the union win and gets in there, then they are prepared to join the union, which I don't think is right anyway. So if Mr. Ward's saying that, try to let the public know that all of his staff don't want a union, that's not true. Some of them in there do want a union.
This strike is without doubt the most important dispute that our trade union movement has faced since the miners' strike in 1974.
I think that for quite a long time they really didn't understand what was expected of them, what they were supposed to do. They dutifully assembled early morning and stood outside the factory gates, and there was really a very token attempt to persuade anyone to do anything. It was extremely difficult.
We were out there, we thought, I don't know, maybe we'll last a few weeks and then everybody will disappear and, they'll all go away, or some of them will get other jobs and that. But once we joined the union, and we sat and we talked and, started arranging pickets and this and that, and things like that, we never knew what to do because we didn't know anything about it. And we were told to do this, that and the other, and that's how we sort of got confident.
In the beginning, it was, I think, special for Asian women. They feel shy to stand outside. In our family also, we are very tolerant, and they don't like to make any, opposition. And it was complete new experience for them. Now they realize that we are not doing wrong thing.
Diraj na foramitache was one of the phrases that they taught me, which was Gujarati for, will you join the strike? I can remember it now.
Before we came out of strike, politically we didn't know nothing. And we beginning to know what Labour Party meant, what Tories meant, how the trade union fitted in the whole structure of that. And it was a good learning curve, and I can say it to you, you can go to any college or school, what we learned in those days, nobody will teach us.
Our argument is trade union recognition at Grunwick, and that is the reason why we're not prepared to handle Grunwick's mail.
Our response to the picket line was that we gave instructions to our drivers and our delivery persons not to cross the line. And that was agreed at a meeting of all the members in the office. And they felt that we, as a sister union, should do something to assist the strikers. And we could do that by refusing to deliver or indeed to accept mail from Grunwick.
There was no work coming in. And obviously Mr. Ward had to give the answer where he was getting all the work from.
And it was fantastic, and we thought with this type of support, we're bound to get recognition.
Ward felt devastated when he heard the news of the boycott, because his entire business and all his profits depended on this one mail order department. And if the mail was stopped, his business was stopped. But that was when, in despair, he contacted his MP, and the National Association for Freedom swung into action.
3 days later, we found ourselves in court, taken there by the National Association for Freedom and George Ward. And we were being told that it was a criminal offence for us to black the Grunwick Mail.
Under the legislation as it then applied to trade unions under that Labour government, solidarity action was lawful.
But the judge said, no, this is not a right for you. This is something that all employers are entitled to have, the right to have communication.
It was the capacity of the courts to break the solidarity action of the postal workers in Cricklewood that left the Grunwick strikers totally exposed and gave even more significance to the need for the picketing, the mass picketing, in support of their action.
How long will you stay here?
Unless when we will finish this dispute.
A year?
Any time.
5 years?
10 years.
You'd stay?
We'll stay.
The Freedom Association had somebody with George practically every day during the dispute. They'd said to George, well, don't worry, George. The reality is that this is new legislation. ACAS will make some problem, some mistake in how they apply it, as long as you keep on resisting helping them in any way, and you'll get away with it.
We were not permitted to conduct a ballot, say, on the premises, or to interview them on the premises, or we were not supplied with the addresses, so that whilst we had a legal obligation to ascertain the views of workers and to examine the situation, there was no legal obligation on the employer to cooperate in any way at all.
If he resisted ACAS's blandishments, there would be no legal comeback. And George Ward was happy to go along with this. It let him off the hook completely.
We nearly won very quickly with the first blacking of the post by the Cricklewood postman. Then when legal action was taken, we knew that we were going to be in for a long haul. What happened then was that we organised arguably unprecedented tour of the country by the strikers. They visited up until the 42nd week. They visited 2,000 workplaces throughout the country.
We went to Scotland, we went to Kent, Scottish miners, Kent miners, we went to the shipyards in Scotland, in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Kilmarnock, Paisley. We went down south to Kent, we went to other places, and a lot of engineering factories, everybody was supporting.
And I can tell you, I never made a speech in my life at that time. I was about 22 or 23, and we went to friends out on Euston High Street, I think Euston, and they asked, can one of us can come up and say a few words, and I was volunteered to go forward, so as I climbed the stairs, I nearly fell down a few times, but I got there, and it was heart beating, but then once I started saying few words, it was a good experience, and first time I made a speech in front of 5,000 to 7,000 people.
And the support we had was brilliant. Never imagined it that we get that kind of support.
It was because the leaflet was going all over the country. Then we decided that why we don't all the support here together at once, it maybe some difference will give them. And that way we decide to make mass picket.
What we did was to have 100 people a day from different trade unions for 5 days outside of the factory as a demonstration of support and solidarity. So your community's with you, the trade union movement's with you.
One day, for example, the legal profession undertook to turn out, and turned out in quite large numbers, including among its numbers John Platts Mills QC, a very distinguished figure who addressed the picket line in his bowler hat and pinstripes with a loud hailer.
We're representing that SOPA, London Joint Branches and London Machine Branch. We feel that all workers in the media, television, newspaper, have a role to play because, in a sense, we've got a responsibility to the rest of the movement. Our skills are being used as some sort of poison that poisons the minds of our people in this country, and we seek to do it in the way that we did at the Observer over the Grunwick issue, when NEF published an advertisement in there that accused trade unionists of being thugs and villains and lawbreakers. We took exception to that. We refused to print it on the basis that we wanted the right to reply. And we also got on the front page our own disclaimer and denunciation of the NAFF. We also finished up with an appeal for funds for the Grunwick strikers, and the Observer at long last agreed to produce that on the front page.
What we used to do where we could was to challenge our companies in Fleet Street where either their advertisements or the articles that they were publishing were either excessive or lying or apparently then supporting people like George Ward at the Grunwick photo laboratory. So Bill Freeman, for example, along with the workers in the Observer and the Telegraph, and along with many other chapels in Fleet Street, regularly challenged the employers. David Astor, who I believe was the editor at the time, but it's so long ago I can't remember, went absolutely bananas, but they were forced to concede.
The first week of the mass picketing was very favourable to the strikers. The first day of it, the Monday, was a women's only picket, and the police had obviously been told to take a firm stand on the first day, and they went in a very heavy-handed fashion.
It was very frightening. I'd been on picket lines more by way of attending as a demonstrator rather than for a picketing purpose, but I found it very frightening. I'd never seen the police in action before. I'd never actually seen them wading into people in that way. I found it absolutely horrifying and very frightening.
I mean, there must have been 8 or 10 policemen just encircled me completely, linking arms, and their tactic was simply to stamp on my feet. I was left unable to walk and had to be conveyed to an accident and emergency unit by ambulance. I had the small bones in one foot broken and the other one was absolutely cut to the bone. It was absolutely diabolical stuff.
So some people were really quite nastily beaten up and hurt. My surgery was the closest one to the picket. And when people were hurt, it was quite reasonable for them to come along. Many of them were patients of mine too.
Following the Friday picket, the Cricklewood postal workers voted to impose a boycott on the mail.
So we switched the blacking on again, and that lasted, well, for 20 days actually. 20 days throughout the July.
That was unbelievable. See that whole sea of people behind you. a small little post office like ours in Cricklewood, a small little group of Asian women and men in a small dingy little factory in Chapter Road could raise that sort of solidarity and support. It shows what the trade union is about. It shows you why everyone should be a member of a trade union.
And everybody was aware what the post office workers were doing, and it was inspirational stuff. And of course, once people are inspired, it's infectious. Other people are inspired, and I think that so much effort was put in by the authorities through the police and through the columns of the newspapers to try to stop workers from supporting each other, because that would spread. You couldn't have, a bunch of workers in Brent being successful as a consequence of being helped by bunches of print workers, miners, post office workers. Where will it all end?
Hey Robbie, where you going? In the middle of the night, I'm going down to London, to the bloody Grunwick site, where a wee small band of immigrants are fighting for their rights. So put your coat on, Jimmy lad, and come and join the fight. Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
Anyway, in South Wales area, we did send pickets up here a fortnight ago, but we didn't have enough up here. We sent a bus load up to our ground, and we decided, in conjunction with the Yorkshire and Scotland, to make this a day of action, July the 11th.
Hey Dieback, what's the hurry? Hey Yanto, what's the rush? We're going down to Grunwick, we're off to stop the bus. In Merthyr, Ponty, Fernhill, and the other South Wales mines, we've down the pick and shovel, and we're up to the picket line.
Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
What do you think's happening there? I think the working class are responding the only way to know how. Displaying solidarity. That's what's needed.
From Glasgow down to Manchester, from Cardiff up to Crewe, from Brighton and from Liverpool, the word is going through. United we shall stand, but divided we shall fall. So get behind your banners bright and rally to the call.
Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
If you look round this strike, or if you as the build-up to this big mass day of support, I think you'd find that the number of women who have participated in it has been fantastically high.
Hey Susie, are you coming? With a seat left in the van. Bring the kids round our place, they're safe with my old man. We're going to join our sisters in the march to victory, with union might and women's right in solidarity.
Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
Well, I think it's a question of class struggle, obviously, we see that the right of the people to organise in the trade unions, which is a basic right, a fundamental right, in fact, and we think that they should be able to organise, and in this 20th century, people shouldn't be able to just kick people out because they seem to be on a trade union, and particularly if they're immigrants, I think they, should be treated a bit better than this.
Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Good morning, everybody from our Grunwick Strikes. And welcome to everybody from Strike on behalf of. And I'm pleased to say you that I'm so happy to see you in everybody in this big support for Grunwick, and there is no doubt I can say that there's a victory is nearer. With your support, we will win.
Well, I want to say this. I think that I'm speaking for every Yorkshire miner, Welsh miner, Scottish miner, and indeed every British trade unionist. We haven't fought for 2 centuries to establish trade unionism in this country and to establish democracy and freedom in order to allow a man like this, with his outdated ideas, to defeat us. And if it takes us a week, a month or a year, I can assure you that we in Yorkshire, we in Great Britain, the mining industry, will play our part in bringing about a successful conclusion to these people who put up a magnificent struggle in the very best interests of trade unionism at Grunwick in North London.
We were no strangers to struggle,
and the miners were no strangers to accepting support and giving support.
And to support people that had no strength whatsoever, you know. That probably more worries. It weren't just the money that they were earning down at Grunwick, that they probably, are we going to get kicked out of the country? Is this what we should do while we're in this country? Do we have to bow down? That's the feeling that most younger miners that went down there had. That's why they massed onto them coaches. There just weren't places for people that wanted to go. There just weren't enough places.
We've come from Yorkshire. Yorkshire. All the bits in Yorkshire.
1,300.
We've seen about 24
Easy.
buses from Leicester. That's from Yorkshire.
No,
That's Yorkshire buses.
We've taken this step in conjunction with the rest of the trade union movement because I feel that there's a very high level decision being taken and now's the time to take on the trade union movement.
It was an act of altruism, and it was an act of spiritual and trade union generosity, but it was bigger than that as well. It was about the eternal conflict between capital and labour.
And one of the most stirring moments in my trade union life, seeing 3,000 Yorkshire miners coming down Chapter Road. And these were people who, in many senses, in terms of culture, industry, community, were 1,000 miles away from the Grunwick strikers, or might well have been. But they just saw injustice and were determined to mobilise on a grand scale by way of solidarity to win justice. I think it was an extraordinary moment in trade union movement history.
The most positive side from where I'm sat is that I was quite proud to be involved in trying to help somebody less fortunate, and in doing so getting educated in the political sense of what sort of boundaries the establishment would go to stop them getting their rights.
Well, the bus was a problem. The bus was picking people up at unknown destinations and generally driving through the gates around which the pickets were standing at a fairly high speed. There was never, ever any chance at all that we were either going to be able to stop the bus or speak to the people on the bus. The whole idea of there being a right to picket in those circumstances was completely fictional.
I think police is for protecting everybody, not only management. But instead of that, police was doing totally different thing. Everything was doing according to the management, not the strikers. The supporters also, he was abused by the police. They were arrested by police. They were hit by police. Everything was done by the police.
All these people doing the abusing and the threatening, they were nothing to do with the strike or the strikers. These were people we'd never met before, who suddenly appeared near the picket lines. And there were even allegations that some of them were agents provocateurs, who were in there to cause trouble for the strikers.
We became spotters, and you would literally go along to some of the more violent demonstrations, and at Grunwick it was our job to go and see who was associating and organising small bands of anarchists and left-wing people. You went up looking as scruffy and dirty and as unkempt as they were. We weren't hairies, but we certainly didn't go out in pinstripe suits with our club ties on.
There was no question at all that the police were helping George Ward to win the strike.
Almost every other week, some of the strikers were getting arrested for obstruction of the highway, and including myself, I got arrested twice obstruction of highway, like, you know.
About 6 or 8 policemen that were pushing me around, and all of a sudden one of them just came on and said, "You're nicked." Put me in the bus. Went in the bus, and a couple of them just started hitting me, and that was it.
And next thing I remember, I was in Northwick Park Hospital, and when the doctor came to see me and said, "Are you one of the strikers?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, I don't think I'll treat you," and he walked away from it.
I remember Audra Wise. She was the MP for Coventry, if I remember rightly. And she came in this very room, and there was a meeting. We made her some tea, and she went to the picket line. I think she got arrested that day.
The pattern of arrests was very interesting. To begin with, I think it was random. As time went on, there was more targeted arrests, there's no doubt about it.
Such was it that they managed to arrest Scargill, Maurice Jones, and enough of the NUM executive to hold an executive meeting in the jail when they took us in.
Prison,
and there was no way the individuals that were picked up was doing anything other than peacefully picketing.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of supporters who'd come to express their solidarity who ended up in the criminal courts. And there was a crisis at one stage. There were so many cases they couldn't hear them, so they had to start farming them out around other courts. Some of the justice was rough justice that was dispensed to those who'd been on the picket line. That's for certain.
The sentence that was imposed was 1 month in prison, which was then suspended for 1 year. But the discussion that took place in the court between my legal representative and the stipendiary magistrates, it was a very close call. I remember clearly the words from the stipendiary magistrate saying that he was going to impose a custodial sentence. And it was basically the character references that had been produced that caused him to suspend it rather than imposing it as an immediate jail sentence.
You see the state in action at its most naked at that point, which is that the purpose of justices of the peace is to keep the peace, and the state's point of view of that involves coming down hard on the protesters. And so case after case after case after case was guilty, unless we had unassailable photographic or film evidence so that we could show that to the magistrate, who then very begrudgingly would have to accept that the police evidence was nonsense. But in all other cases, the stipendiary magistrates just weren't having it.
And let us say this, that while we're sure that a court of inquiry will find our way, we want to make this clear, that the mobilisation of our movement goes on until such time as each and every one of these brave strikers has been reinstated and the union is recognised within this company.
Scarman was used by government repeatedly, 4 occasions in his life, as other judges were not used, to try to bring peace where there was strife. Londonderry, Red Lion Square, Grunwick, and then lastly Brixton. And it's a job that he did rather magnificently. He conducted his inquiries with great charm, but with complete authority.
I was organising the representation of the Trades Council in the Scarman inquiry, and one of the things we put into the evidence there, which none of the other parties put in, was the situation in which migrant labour and non-white people found themselves in the labour market at the time. They were being exploited by employers like Grunwick's and an awful lot of smaller employers. And this information influenced the way the report came out. It was an important part of the report.
The report's recommendations were 90% in favour of the strikers and in favour of the union. And that was why, almost immediately, Grunwick rejected the report. They rejected it almost out of hand.
Before the Scarman's inquiry had begun, we did say, if it's not legally binding, George Ward is not going to do anything about it. And we did say that from day one.
After all, they'd rejected ACAS and there'd been no comeback. So now they rejected Scarman, and there was no comeback to that either.
Yes, that was the situation. The final court of appeal was the picket line.
I remember well November the 7th, the so-called Day of Reckoning. This was the day when there'd been one final push to achieve mass support for the aspirations of those on strike at Grunwick, when the SPG appeared to use what was called a flying wedge to attack the pickets, to pull them out and then to damage them.
The SPG were the Special Patrol Group, and they believed in aggressive policing. It was to do with terrorism and Irish situation which existed at the time.
They regarded themselves as an elite group, and I think there was a culture of violence, and I think that there was a tremendous determination not to let the pickets win.
The police were very well prepared and clearly had a political sanction to do what they did.
You don't get the local force replaced by the Special Patrol Group just because the local constabulary decides it. It's decided by the Met on orders from above. So I think Merlin Rees, who was pretty unsupportive anyway, was complicit.
Labour movement that I belong to hasn't the right to break laws. No doubt about that, and the history of the last 200 years shows the victory of the labour movement not in breaking the law. It didn't arise. It was getting the law on their side and getting representation in Parliament and so on.
People don't like violence. They see it as criminal, as reprehensible, and deeply disturbing socially. But along comes television then, films it, shows the bits they want, highly edited, and bingo.
At the time, a lot of people looking in from their television sets and newspapers seemed to see the government fairly impotent to resolve the dispute. Were you conscious of that?
There was a frustration, but when you say the government was impotent, it was impotent in that particular case because it was almost a textbook case of how not to go about obtaining trade union recognition.
I think the government had one or two problems at the time, and one of them was that they hadn't got a majority. Callaghan was the Prime Minister at the time, a right-wing leader who had started his life on the right wing of the trade union movement. He knew more, I believe, about trade union leaders individually and collectively than any Prime Minister while I've been in Parliament. So you've got to bear in mind he had got all the right connections, knew which levers to pull and all the rest of it. He was naturally worried about the fact that three of his pals, Fred Mulley, Shirley Williams, Dennis Howell, and they were his pals. They were very, very close to Callaghan. They helped to put him there. Were part of that union, and I'm sure that he would have done anything to try and get the show off the road.
How did it come up in Cabinet? Because at the time there were two, if not three, members of Apex, the union that the strikers had joined, that were on the Cabinet.
Well, the discussion then was around the issue of how we could terminate the dispute, and the concern of the cabinet ministers was about the nature of the demonstrations that were taking place. I did talk to TUC committee and Lem Murray, But they, in fact, I think, had one or two rogue elements. I think Arthur Scargill was a case in point, bringing down the Yorkshire miners. I don't think that he was encouraged in any way by the TUC. In fact, on the contrary, I think they probably tried to discourage him.
We are not only on your side, we are side by side with you, and we'll be there until you and we have won.
Oh, first when he came, then he told us very nice words that we are supporting you, we are behind you, and we are get together, we are next to you, and you have not to worry about all these things. He gave good words, but didn't do anything.
There is only one way of bringing this strike to a rapid and victorious conclusion. And I say this quite bluntly. Local telephonists, local gas workers, local water workers, local telephone engineers, local electricity workers, local power workers must cut off their supply.
There was a lot of conniving going on. I mean, Len Murray gave the impression he was trying to get the essential services together, but nothing seemed to be very pressurised. Everyone was talking about what we should be doing, but not many people doing a lot at all.
Grassroots level support was brilliant. And if we had that type of support from the national unions, then we would have got the union recognition.
Len was a great man, and his job was to get the General Council to do things where it was appropriate. And I appealed to a number of them to help us in that dispute in a way that could have stopped the company. But they said to me, Roy, you don't know what you're talking about. If we did this, A, what dispute wouldn't we be involved in? And B, we would be in the courts, and our members would be in grave danger of being sacked, and the union would be fined enormous sums. Now, we can't rush into every dispute that operates up and down the country. That's not our job. Unions have to fight for their own members.
Whilst I was at ACAS, we also had a recognition claim for another big company, American company, who said that they were totally opposed to trade union recognition anywhere in the world, and they wouldn't agree. And I went to Sweden, because that was the one country where they recognised the union. And I went to Sweden and found out how the union had gained recognition. It was the metal workers, and they'd put in a claim, and it had been refused, and they then went to the Swedish TUC, LO as it's known, and Swedish LO wrote to the firm and said, under Swedish law, as you will be aware, if a strike is legal, all solidarity action in support of that strike, peaceful solidarity action, is also legal. And we are advising you, they gave proper warnings, requests for talks, but all this was refused. We are advising you that we will call upon other unions to withdraw all the supplies, electricity, water, postal, even policing. And the firm conceded recognition. So I think that in a case like Grunwick, solidarity action is really the answer.
A lot of the time, the TUC, I think Len Murray was the General Secretary in those days, and we didn't really get very good support from them. They were always trying to hold you back. There was unions that were willing to support us, but they were being told not to.
The pressure and confusion in Grunwick came from the antics of the ultra-left politicians. if that had been run by the strike committee with the support of its union apex and with the support of other unions, there might have been some chance of maintaining a picket situation in which pressure could have been kept on board. As it was turned right round into a political manifestation, and the opportunity of putting pressure on Lord was lost completely because of the way in which the ultra-left politicians decided to take advantage of it and exploit the Grunwick workers.
If you wind down that mass movement, it becomes very difficult to regain momentum. So mountains were moved in August, September, October, November of 1977 to try and regain the initiative, to rebuild that momentum, but it proved to be impossible.
Towards the end of the strike, you could see that Apex was putting less effort into it. The officers were less available, the resources weren't around. The feeling was that Apex felt that the dispute was finished, and it didn't really know how to deal with it, because it wasn't even as if they could go back to work, because there was nothing to go back to.
The reason we have taken this action is because the TUC, after promising so many times, haven't moved themselves and done what they have told us they will do so, like cutting off the essential services and supporting us.
They are saying that we hope that this will happen, but nothing is coming out. We want answer that whether they are going to do something or not.
The thing is, they can resolve this strike in a couple of days and stop us suffering on the picket and on the hunger strike as well.
There was all the union leaders meeting in Congress House. And once we went there, Len Murray told me inside, and when he called inside and he said, "Who told you to do that?" I said, "Look, it is my tradition. Because the hunger strike is my Gandhi's tradition." And that's what I told him, that this is my tradition. Nobody told me. I want to show the people who are supporting us. We want to show them. And that time when they are not decided not to support, then I told in front of the Congress House, a lot of people who are supporting us, they were gathered. And I talked to them, I addressed them, "Look, this is happening now. We are stopping the hunger strike and we are going home." And that's why we finished the strike.
It was an act of desperation. It was done at a time when all their support was dwindling away. It was a last fling that even so-called left-wing members of the TUC General Council now wanted to put the Grunwick strike aside. We were told that the big picture was pay restraint and the social contract, and that any further Grunwick action would get in the way of focusing upon that. And I was getting this message from organisations such as the Socialist Workers' Party and the Communist Party. Bert Ramelson and Paul Foote both said that the main focus from now on should be on beating the social contract and pay restraint. And therefore they weren't really interested in diverting resources anymore towards the strikers.
Here we were fighting for a basic right, to be a member of a union, fight for a decent wage and decent conditions, which were the basic demands for any worker. And we didn't get that. Even with all the mighty unions and the power of the trade union movement, we didn't win.
When I look back at that, I think, well, how come just a simple recognition dispute, how come that we didn't win it? I mean, it was so right. It was absolutely and completely right, and yet we seem to have failed somehow. Why did we fail?
I'm proud to have taken place at Grunwick's, and I'll tell my kids I was proud to take part in Grunwick's, and I'll always remember it, because it's strange to say, isn't it, that rank and file miners could understand what was happening, could understand the ramifications, can understand what was at stake there. And that the so-called leadership of the Labour movement didn't.
I looked for a job, and I went for quite a few interviews. And where did you work last? Grunwick, don't want to know you. But Barry Jackson, the TNG district officer, got me a job for a local company in Park Royal, a company called Expandide. And then I became a shop steward, became a union convener. Because of my lessons and the skills and the knowledge I achieved during the strike, helped me to become a good convener. And I negotiated for my members in that workplace, and I was very good at my job.
पीछे फिर मैं जॉब सेंटर में गई, वो कॉन्फिडेंस मेरे को आया जो स्ट्राइक के लिए।
आप उसके बाद कभी यूनियन में रहे? कोई और
उधर तो यूनियन था ना, जब भी मैं थी ना उधर यूनियन था।
तो आपने यूनियन ज्वाइन किया?
हाँ, ज्वाइन किया था। वो लोग तो बहुत अच्छा थे, वो यूनियन और एम्प्लॉय में तो बहुत अच्छे थे वो लोग।
Do you ever have discussions or arguments with people when they know that you were on the strike? Do they say, well, that was a waste of time, why did you get involved with trade unions? Did you have
No, I haven't experienced that yet. Not at all. Everybody sympathized. They say, oh, you did a good move, and it was really, really good move. And nobody, till today, still today, sometime when we have a conversation, nobody say it was a waste of time. Nobody's come to me.
And what Tom Jackson said to us, that we were infringing the rules of the union, and that he will be setting up a disciplining committee. And with that, he read out the riot act about what we'd done and what rules that we'd broken. The chairman was sitting beside him, who agreed that we were completely wrong in the attitude that we had taken. The letter was posted through my door, and it said, you are fined £200. And John Taylor was fined £300, and the committee were all fined various amounts, which amounted in total to over £1,000. We were annoyed, and as I turned with the committee to walk out of the room, he shouted out to me, "Who do you think you are? The conscience of the union?"
One of the lasting effects of the dispute, I think, was bringing together what had been hitherto thought of as separate spheres. After all, there have been Black and Asian workers in the British trade union movement who were completely ignored by the British labour movement, British trade union movement for donkey's years. And these were people who had enormous experience of struggle in their own countries against British imperialism and in building trade unions. They came to this country and they weren't considered to be fit to be involved even. And in fact, the TUC, I know this was work that I do, held them arm's length because they thought they were terribly dangerous communists and all the rest of it. Well, these were very experienced people. At last, some of the experience was beginning to be used and learnt from. It presented a completely different image of the trade union movement, and one which those of us who are conscious of needing to change the image of the trade union movement have continued to use. And I think that's a powerful image, and one that I don't think will be forgotten or lost.
The TUC was punching far less than its weight during the Grunwick dispute. It failed to act in remotely as organised a way as it was capable of doing. It failed, as so often, to use its collective strength. Whereas, on the other hand, those who were motivated to overcome the recommendation for recognition, as though that were their motivation, those who were motivated to win this dispute against the wishes of the trade union movement, seemed to act in a united way, seemed to be absolutely clear as to their objective.
They were trying to prove that the Heath government had been too soft, and that the Heath government could have defeated the miners, defeated the trade union movement, if only it had been tough enough and had been legalistic enough. And it was a dress rehearsal for the Thatcher government that came in 1979.
It was probably the most significant industrial dispute up to then, since 1945. Because of the people involved, because of the ramifications of it, because of the result, and because of the lessons that were learned by our class enemies and not learned by us.
Colleagues, I come to a very special part of our proceedings to ask Mrs Desai, welcome Mrs Desai from the London region and also the Grunwick steward. The gold badge is in recognition of her outstanding dedication and determination during the dispute at George Ward's Grunwick Photo Processing Factory in the 1970s. To this day, the Grunwick dispute is still seen as an important landmark in the history of British industrial action and the struggle for equal rights. Congress, I give you Mrs Desai and I award her our highest honour for the work her and her colleagues done during that long struggle. Thank you.
It doesn't change me much. Let me tell you, I'm like that person. From the start, I'm the same person. But because from that, so many people can learn so many things. What you want to do or what is courage you got, and you can develop your courage as well, and you can raise your head in front of injustice. So many things you can learn it.
And while we're waiting, Gordon, there's a lady in this hall at the back that we have honoured today who led the Grunwick strike. She's up the back. We can't bring her down because it's a long way down. Mrs Desai, just say hello to her.
Hello, Mrs Desai. Very nice to see you. You come up and see me at the end.
For 2 years, she led a campaign. The right to join the trade union.
Liz Blackman, Midlands and East Coast region. Gordon, let me be clear. Will you be changing the existing law to allow supportive action by related groups of workers in the same company when the trade union needs to take industrial action?
Cathy Holland, London region. Gordon, as a leader of the Labour Party, will you ensure that the support of the unions by repealing anti-trade union laws?
Gordon, how do you propose to restore the link between the Labour Party and the trade union movement?
Gordon, we in the trade union movement are concerned about the use of migrant workers being paid lower wages and with poor working conditions and benefits. What steps will you take to ensure that the laws are changed to ensure the equal treatment and pay for migrant workers?
Who is courageous, nobody can stop it. Who is courageous, they will come out. Anyway, if you put them into the earth, they will come out. That's what I believe it. And that way, nobody will stop them. Who is courageous.